I think that the Bitcoin community has an opportunity to embrace the technology, spread it to everywhere, and be everybody's friend. Bitcoin is a magic technology that offers benefits to any individual or entity that adopts it. Yes. And on the other hand, the simplest way in which to adopt it right now is as a long-term store of value asset if you're a private entity and you're not subject to gap-based accounting. And the other ways you can adopt it, they have more friction, accounting friction, tax friction, compliance friction. For example, like we can agree that it would be good if banks, if banks banked Bitcoin, that would be good. But many banks are afraid to do this due to FDIC guidance. I think today there was just a story coming out that Citigroup announced that they will probably start to custody Bitcoin. So what we need is to educate the regulators, educate the politicians, and then as the FDIC and FASB and the SEC and the CFTC and the OCC and every other agency starts to understand and provide useful guidance, then all those companies will start to take much larger positions, and then the investment community will support that, and Bitcoin will spread as technology. And the best way to get them to provide that constructive guidance is just avoid taking unnecessarily adversarial positions in the evangelism or the advocacy. We don't need to end the dollar in the Fed in order to spread the good cheer of Bitcoin. We can make everybody in the United States could be better off, right, without dramatic changes to the government. If there was 100x as much Bitcoin, they'd all be better off right now without changing anything in the government. So the world's full of challenges. There are a lot of things that are inefficient in the world. We could talk about them for 100 hours. But I think the whole point of laser eyes is focus your energy. So if what is a laser? A laser is I have a certain amount of energy and I narrow my focus to a pen head, a pinprick, the narrowest focus possible. And why do I do that? So I can go the longest distance without dissipation. So every time you broaden your focus, you dissipate your energy and you lose your reach. And so the question really is what can you accomplish and how are you going to accomplish it? You're not going to fix every company, government in the near, every bank and every government future with the Bitcoin message. I tend to look at it a different way, which is there are some entities that can adopt it now, and we should go find them and help them do it. Mm-hmm. There are some places where it's just going to be a very, very difficult or impossible. Don't waste your energy. Don't waste your energy fighting with them. You're not going to change their mind. Don't squander your energy. You don't have time, and you don't have the energy to pick fights with people, along the road of life, right? You should just move on. Let me offer another possible metaphor here. Let's say I invented a fusion reactor, and it generated infinite energy for $1. I can give you enough energy to run your family for the rest of your life for $1. Okay, so I'm going to go travel around the world, and where am I going to be happiest with that fusion reactor? Well, I go to North Korea, and they find out I have it, and I'm not allowed to own things, and they take it away from me, and they kill me. Okay, that didn't work so well. Mm-hmm. But I have a fusion reactor. Maybe I take it to a place where there's no rule of law, so the government just seizes it. Right? Maybe I take it to a country where there's 100 different tribes and they're all warring with each other. And so I set up and I'm living happily ever after, and one tribe hears about me with another tribe dancing and they come and they kill me. Okay? No rule of law, no peace. I go to another country and their taxes are excessive, you know, and they find out that I have a nuclear reactor or a fusion reactor, so they just tax me to death and I lose it. I mean, the short of it is, you have a great technology, it's magical. You want to live in a country where they speak your language, where there's a rule of law, where there's peace, where there's a police force. Like, what if your neighbor just comes over with a gun and shoots you in the head and takes your fusion reactor? Right? The fusion reactor doesn't solve all your problems. Right? The fusion reactor doesn't make Afghanistan a peaceful place to live for an American, you know, that practices Christianity either, right? Like, there are simple common sense observations, which is, you have a technology, you go to a politically supported place, you know, and you know, you wouldn't go to a country and say, I have a fusion reactor and I'm giving away power for free to everybody in the country, and I'm putting the nation's electric power provider out of business because they're evil people because they sell the electricity. Right? That's not the best way to do it, right? You're probably better off to go to the country's monopoly energy provider and offer to set up the fusion reactor for them so that they can harness it. You know, and part of you would say, well, they really should give away the energy for zero, but they're going to charge a penny a kilowatt hour. But if they were charging 10 cents a kilowatt hour, then getting them to lower the price to a penny a kilowatt hour is a benefit to everybody, and they get a piece of the action. And you're not a revolutionary, you're an evolutionary, you're a technologist, right? And we move forward. So I think that that's the case with any great technology. The technology is not enough for you to go, you know, anywhere and right any wrong. And you don't really need to make it a political fight in order to spread the technology. Most people, you know, if they see an automobile and it'll get them from point A to point B in an hour instead of walking for 2 days, they could be persuaded, regardless of political conviction and religious conviction, that the automobile is a good idea. Right? They have automobiles in a lot of countries that don't agree with American politics, and vice versa. So, and likewise, right? Crude oil, aluminum, steel, automobiles, airplanes have all been, you know, enthusiastically adopted in communist, socialist, capitalist, you know, autocratic, theocratic states. Even enthusiastically adopted in countries with hyperinflation. Right? They may be hyperinflating, but they still appreciate steel in the building, right? If you ever walk out on the 15th floor of a building without the steel and the floor collapses and you and all your friends die, right? Then you could be persuaded that steel is a valuable technology. And the key there is whoever sells the steel needs to make it an apolitical statement. And I think with Bitcoin can be spread everywhere on Earth, you know, as digital energy, right? As a technology, right? If Bitcoin is digital energy, then it's simply the next evolution of electricity, or oil, or atomic power, or hydropower, or solar power, or the internet. It's just the next thing. If Bitcoin's got to be a digital currency, then you're going to have to replace the government, right? Either peacefully or in a hostile fashion, you got to replace the government. It's just like, given, if I were to try to calculate the difference in effort, one of the things is like 1,000,000 times harder to do, plus a lot of bloodshed, right? Castro replaced the government, but like, would you want to do that? I mean, even if I told you could, like, we had a civil war in the United States, right? Like, you don't really want a civil war. There's no winners. And so I think that the Bitcoin community has an opportunity to embrace the technology, spread it to everywhere, and be everybody's friend. And I think that's something we ought to be spending more time thinking about. And I think we should spend a lot less time fighting over the currency, because once you've made the point that the currency has inflation, I think you just got to move on, because the next debate is whether or not gold is better than Bitcoin for fighting inflation, right? Because you're not going to actually eliminate the source of inflation, right? That will require regime change. If we demonetize everything everywhere, maybe we cure half of the problem, which is good. I think that's enough. It might take 100 years. I'm hard pressed to think it takes less than 100 years. Feels like it's like a multi-generational exercise if we're successful. And then at the end of it, you're still going to have debates about whether to give 4-year-old kids pharmaceutical products to treat their ADD, right? You're still going to have debates over religion. You're still going to have debates over, someone at age 87 is dying and someone wants to give them $1 million treatment and someone else says that that's too expensive, right? And you're going to have all those issues. And, someone's born and they just have a view that they should beat you. Okay, it's going to happen. We're not going to, some other science or technology breakthrough might address some of that problem. And we still got the problem of how do we go to Mars, and should we stop there, and should we go to Alpha Centauri or beyond? These are all problems, and some people want to live forever, and the problem is we can't live forever. And other people don't think we should live forever. And the problem is stopping the people that want to live forever, right? And those things are going to go on. We're not going to address those. I don't think we need to. I think that the root problem that Bitcoin has put their fingers on is there's a lack of conservation of energy in the civilization. There's an energy imbalance, and everything that we think of as money, that we use as money, and right now we use gold, and we use $90 trillion of currency derivatives and $100 trillion of bonds, and we use trillions of dollars of equity, and we use collectibles. We use all sorts of other derivatives. There's a lot of things we use as money. All of those things we use as money are low velocity, inefficient transmitters of energy that drain energy. And the cost of that you could measure in the tens of trillions, 10 trillion, 20 trillion a year. So some huge amount, right? 20 trillion is the GDP of the United States, right? Nominally measured. So the cost of the broken money or the lack of a proper monetary system is many, many trillions a year, compounding for the last 100 years, for the next 100 years. Fixing that is, it's no different than if you're an athlete and you were bleeding a pint of blood an hour, and I didn't stop the bleeding, right? I mean, the number one rule of triage is stop the bleeding first. Well, first make sure you can breathe, right? Yeah. 3 minutes without air and you're dead, and then make sure your bleeding stops, because you'll bleed out in a few minutes. And then after that, figure out what the rest of the problem is. So I think that we should think of ourselves as trying to stop the bleeding. The source of the bleeding is a lack of effective money. And the human race has never had an effective money, a mathematically sound, thermodynamically sound money, right? Gold was the closest thing, but it's way too inefficient. It bleeds energy too fast in time and in space, right? You can't really use it. So we now have a situation where 10 basis points of the civilization has a limited, has an effective store of value. And of course, nobody has an effective medium of exchange, right? So you could probably say it's like 2 or 3 or 4 basis points of the entire economy is efficient. 99.95% of all the economic activity in time and in space is woefully inefficient.
Totally.
And how inefficient? you know, we probably got to assume we're losing 10 to 15% of energy. If you were writing a calculus equation, right? The time variable was losing 15% of your energy with time, and then there's another dissipation coefficient, which is how much energy per transaction. If you just come back to this idea that we're like 3 basis points, 1, 2, 3 basis points permeated, you can see that a factor of 10, you know, gets you to 30 basis points. A factor of 100 gets you to 3% of potential. So 100x from now, we're 3% of potential. 1,000x from now, we're 30% of potential. And so there's massive, tremendous opportunity here. And we can do this in a very cheerful, constructive way simply by focusing people on the technology and just showing them how much more efficient, how much higher the quality of living is for any entity, any part of our civilization, should they adopt a better energy technology.